Okay, so today I'm going to be going over the best things to focus on and do when you're returning from an injury back into the gym. Let's get into it. Okay, so the first three tips kind of go together. So I'm going to basically say them in order. So the first thing is if you've taken like a really long break, like let's say you've had like anything really over like 2 weeks, honestly, anything over 2 weeks that was caused by an injury and you're coming back from that, right? Honestly, I would say start with about half weight. So let's say it was your biceps or whatever. You normally curl like a 60-pound like bar, like an easy bar or something, right? I would start at 30. Start at 30 pounds and then you're gonna start there because especially if it's your first session back, you don't know how it's gonna feel. So you need to kind of feel out how it's gonna feel and kind of figure out from there what you wanna do. And then another really important thing is to slowly work up from there. Because if you haven't dealt with a lot of injuries, you might not know this, but as someone who has dealt with a lot of injuries throughout my life, when you start working up, let's go back to that curling example, right? So you used to do 60, now you're at 30. 30 might feel fine. You might even get to 40 and it still feels pretty fine, but you might hit like 45, just add those 5 pounds, right? And that might start hurting for whatever reason. Just adding that tiny bit of weight might start hurting. So that's why you don't want to make these big jumps. Like if 30 feels fine, you don't want to jump to like 50 and then go straight to 60. You want to take small incremental jumps from that original weight you started at. So in this case, it would be 30 pounds. Start there, take your time and go up. Another thing, and this kind of coincides with that last tip of like taking it slow, is when you're coming back from an injury, there has to be like a plan in place for where you're going to start. Obviously, your end goal is to be stronger and better than you originally were, but that's just the starting point and the end point. You need to have a plan of how you're going to get from that starting point to that end point. So if that's adding maybe 5 pounds a week, if you're training twice a week, so that means every 2 sessions you add 5 pounds to that curl. So you go from 30 to 35 to 40 to 45 and so on. And once you have that plan, it is so important to stick to the plan, because the amount of times I've heard of other people doing this, or I've tried to rush it and tweaked it a little more. Like when you try and rush back an injury, all you do is create the injury being elongated. You just make it take longer for you to get back to where you originally are. And it's so hard to do because no one wants to do that monotonous work where you're just lifting weights that you know you can go heavier, or like a couple months ago you could have gone heavier. And it's just so frustrating when you have to do it, but you have to be willing to take that time, or else this injury that might only take you a month to rehab might turn into 2 months, 3 months, or even longer of a rehab. Or you could just go from maybe having like a slight tear to a major tear. If you have a major tear, that might mean you're gonna have to have surgery. And that means you're gonna need a way longer of a recovery, and you're gonna have to start even further back. So it's crucial that you start off slow, using low weights, and slowly stick to your plan of how you're gonna get from that point A of that low weight back to being stronger than you were at that point B. But you gotta stick to the plan. Okay, so the next thing I wanna focus on is a lot of times, especially if you've ever worked with a physical therapist after an injury, if you didn't know this, basically what physical therapy really is obviously there's the massaging and there's like the healing of it and stuff like that. But a lot of physical therapy with the like exercise part is just strengthening the muscles around your injured area. So for example, like I have a knee injury right now that I'm literally in the process of rehabbing. One of the reasons I'm making this video. So for me right now, my big focus is strengthening like my quad, my hamstrings, and just all the surrounding muscles around my knee, because I want to make all the surrounding muscles as strong as they can be, so that if my knee has to slightly compensate in one area because of a weakness or an injury, all the surrounding muscles are strong enough to actually deal with that slight compensation. That's a lot of your focus. Now, it's going to be a long process, but one thing you have to know is, so when you're first coming back, let's go to this knee analogy that I've been using, that I just started with, right? So if something hurts at first, especially in like those first couple weeks back in the gym, I would say, now obviously if you're working with a doctor and they've told you otherwise, or a physical therapist has told you otherwise, obviously follow what they're saying, disregard what I'm saying. But if you're not working with anyone, or you haven't really been given any true like instructions, you have to do this when this happens, if you start feeling pain, I would immediately stop. If it's like a 1 or 2 on the pain scale, maybe you could try and push through it. but you really shouldn't be pushing through things that are painful, especially after an injury, because a lot of times that means you're just aggravating that injury and you're gonna probably end up making that rehab take longer. Now, there are scenarios where you should push through the pain. So for example, I said I'm rehabbing a knee injury. I've just started lifting and hitting legs again, or hitting legs. I've obviously been lifting. So with that though, the first 2 leg days I had, anytime I felt any type of pain, I would see if it was like the angle or try and do something quickly and do a quick tweak to see if it was just like a one-time occurrence. But anytime there was like any repeated pain, like for example, when I was doing a leg press, just the motion of a leg press immediately hurt, I immediately shut it down to the leg press. Was not doing that. Immediately was just shutting down any exercises where it hurt. Now, this alternate situation though is, so this Friday I have a leg day and I talked to my physical therapist today and he told me, he's like, I want you to push through the pain up till about a 5 on the pain scale. If it's more than a 5, shut it down. But he wants to see what is actually going on, and a great way for like your physical therapist to be able to try and figure out the issue if they don't fully know, which in my case, there isn't really a solid answer on what's fully wrong with my knee. Then what he wants is he kind of wants to see my knee slightly inflamed and see what happens and have me test it out a little bit. It also helps that I'm a certified personal trainer and to a degree know what I'm doing. So he's a lot more willing to test things out with me because I'm not gonna be stupid and mess it up because I have some knowledge in this area. But, so as I said though, on this Friday, I'm gonna try and push it a little bit. But if it goes over a 5, shutting it down immediately. If it's under a 5, maybe it's like a 3 on the pain scale, I'm gonna push through that pain and keep working. Now, kind of in accordance with just everything I've been saying in this video so far, you have to understand going into a rehab, it's not going to be fun. You're gonna have to do exercises you don't wanna do. They're gonna be boring. You're gonna have to use weights that feel like you're doing nothing in the gym, and it's gonna feel like it's a waste of your time half the time. But you know that it's not a waste of your time. This is how you're gonna get back to being better than you originally were. Because that's the whole goal with rehab, is not only to get back to where you were, but you wanna be better than where you were so that you don't have re-injury. Another thing to focus on is, as I said, like you're gonna be using light weights and doing exercises that probably are like pretty easily, especially if you're a more like experienced lifter. Even honestly, if you've just been lifting for like more than a year, it's probably gonna be kind of boring. But what you can do is, instead of having that energy that would normally go into pushing a heavy load in the gym and pushing that heavy amount of weight, take that energy and focus on having absolutely perfect form and getting those really good mind muscle connections, and like just really focusing on the squeeze, the contraction, the stretch, and everything. Like instead of having maybe putting like 95% effort into how good your form is and then everything into the intensity of the exercise, the intensity is going to be a little lower because you're using less weight. But you're going to want to focus on having clean, perfect reps. You might even increase the rep range a little bit because you don't want to push as high of a load. So for example, typically before my knee injury, I was putting up probably like 200 pounds of leg extensions for like somewhere around like 10 reps, and then I would drop set it immediately. Now I've cut it in half. I'm doing about 100 pounds, but I'm doing 15 reps, and these are some of the cleanest reps you'll see. Like I am doing this as slow as I can. I'm increasing the time and retention because that's another way to increase the intensity without having to increase the amount of weight I'm using, which I know I can't use a lot of weight, so that's another strategy that I'm using to increase the intensity. And just like really perfecting your form. Okay, so now I have 2 kind of like final things that I want to get into. Obviously, it's gonna take a while when you're rehabbing. There's some injuries that might only be like a couple weeks, but a lot of the times, like your rehab is just gonna be a while, and that's just how it's gonna be. But if you really focus on it, you can, as I said, not only get back to 100% of where you were, you can get even stronger from where you were. Because you're not only going to have that original strength you had back in that specific muscle or area of your body, but if you really took that rehab seriously, now you're also going to have all the surrounding muscles being even stronger than they originally were. So now you're just going to be able to be stronger in that area. And hopefully, if you did everything right, with all this new strength in that area, that's gonna allow you to prevent future injuries, so you don't gotta go through this boring process all again, because no one likes having to rehab their injuries. And the last thing is, everything I've talked about in this video so far has been about in the gym. What can you do in the gym? What can you do in the gym, right? But there's also rehab outside of the gym. That's going to be just as important, probably even more important, honestly, especially if you're like early on in that rehab process. And this is going to be things like icing if you're inflamed, heating if it's a day you're not working that muscle, but you want to increase the blood flow to the area to try and heal it a little more. That's typically more for like muscle injuries though. Like that's where you're going to use heat. Now if you have physical therapy, you're going to want to make sure you're getting to all your appointments, getting that deep massage at your physical therapy. Now you also can, if your physical therapist is giving you exercises to do daily, make sure you're doing them daily. Like that is something so simple that you need to be doing. Whatever your physical therapist or doctor is telling you to do, you need to try and just dial it in. If rehab and getting back to where you were is truly a top priority for you, these are the things you're just gonna have to do. And these are the things that are gonna allow you to be so successful. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people don't take their rehab seriously, which is why it ends up taking longer than expected, or they don't really ever truly get back to 100%. But if you really take it seriously, focus on all these things, honestly, you might even be able to get back faster than you originally were supposed to be. That's why like you hear about a lot of these athletes that they had like, it was supposed to be that they were out like 6 weeks and they come back in 4 weeks. That's because they're taking their rehab so seriously, plus they're already strong around it. That's why another thing is injury prevention. Honestly, a lot of it is being strong initially before the injury, because it allows you to come back so much faster because you already have that muscle around your injured area to allow you to let that injured area compensate slightly if it needs to, and then get back to 100%. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope whatever injury you're dealing with, you can are able to rehab properly and get back to 100%. Got any questions about any rehab, I can try and answer them in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, send this to anyone you know who might be dealing with injury. Hopefully I can help them out. I hope you enjoyed. Again, catch y'all next Sunday at 5 p.m. Catch you there.